Perfect. Well, this is my name is Stuart Blumenthal. I'm the Intacct Practice Director here at ETHOSystems. This is our annual Sage Intacct 1099 and year-end training, and we're excited to have you as part of this presentation. We got a lot of people on here, and as normal, we'll have a lot of questions throughout the process. Sorry, gonna get my mouse to work. Just for a quick overview, the webinar is gonna be about 30 to 45 minutes. All the phone lines are muted during this time. If anyone has a question, please use the questions feature within GoToWebinar. We'll be monitoring that along the way. And if you want to copy the presentation, just feel free to put your email address inside the webinar questions, and we'll make sure that's sent off afterwards. So every year, people go, well, I need to close the books. And if you really think about it, you're closing the books every single month. But during the year end, there are some additional steps that you need to take, one of them being 1099s, but there's other things you should be doing. And so our goal is to go through the different modules, talk about how to close the books, and then we'll dive into the 1099 aspect at the conclusion. So not everyone has every one of these modules. Some people have some people might not have all of them, but we will go through them just so that people know how to close the modules for each of the modules. So the first module is purchasing. So in this one here, what we always tell our clients to do is, first of all, review your open purchase orders. If you received in the goods, but you haven't received the invoice and it's been about a month or two, usually that something's wrong there. Make sure that all your purchase orders have gotten converted through receiving and through invoicing. That's really important. And then if you are using the purchasing module, there's another aspect called purchases clearing, or some people know it as inventories payables. And what that basically means is that you received in the goods, but you have not received in the invoice. So what it does is that it debits inventory, credits purchases clearing, or inventories payables. When you receive in the invoice, it's going to debit that account and then credit accounts payable. So it's basically kind of a holding account. It's a balance sheet account that shows up on your liabilities. So for those who were not expecting an accounting class today, this is an accounting class. And what you really want to think about with that is making sure that that is reconciled, make sure that that balance is accurate, because it is sitting on your balance sheet. The next module is order entry. There's not a lot to do in order entry, but we always tell you, make sure you clean up your open purchase orders, especially if you have inventory module. You might have demand coming against that. So it's, again, a good time to make sure that have you, gotten all your orders converted, and are they all correct? Inventory control. Well, first of all, one thing that most people do at year end is they do a physical count of their inventory. That is something that we can help you with here at Ethos. If there are companies that if it's taking a while and you're doing it by paper or by hand, there are add-on solutions that do handle barcoding. But from an accounting aspect, the most important thing to do is review your valuation, your inventory valuation report, and compare that to the general ledger. Make sure that those two entries match. Now, one of the things that I always point out to people is that if there's something wrong, don't fix the general ledger, but you always want to fix the subsidiary module first. So you want to make sure your subsidiary module is right, and then you fix the general ledger at that point. If you fix the general ledger, it's not going to fix the subsidiary module. So if you're trying to fix your AR balance, again, make sure your subsidiary ledger, the AR or the AP or the inventory, is correct, and then fix the general ledger. For those who have projects and jobs, make sure your WIP is correct. Always review your WIP. That's always important. For those who have time and expense, verify all your time sheets and expenses have been posted. That's part of your month-end process. And then for the final ones here, For the cash management module, make sure your bank recs are complete. Make sure that, it, again, ties to the general ledger. And then for your accounts receivable and accounts payable, you could run either the ledger, AR ledger, or the AR aging report. But when you run those for in AR or AP, there's a setting in there to make sure that you base this upon the general ledger posting. And what I mean by that is that if I go into my Sage Intacct here, go to accounts receivable, go to my ledger, and bring up this report, you want to scroll all the way down. Now, the one nice thing about Sage Intacct is that it will remember how you last ran this. But again, do not base these upon document date. Base these upon general ledger date. Same concept for my aging report, for example, and I go to reports and I scroll all the way down. And again, make sure that it's based upon the general ledger. And I'm trying to find that as we speak. Make sure it's based upon the general ledger. Sorry, I went too far. Make sure it's based upon the general ledger posting, not the invoice date or due date. That's going to be really important to make sure they tie to each other there. One thing I always like to do is that, for month-end reports, I always like to process and store those. Allows you to store them offline, or maybe export those to Excel. That way you have a history of them at that point. Even though you could rerun them, later, I always like to have a hard copy of them at that point so that if someone has done something that they should not have done, I've got a backup of that report at that point. That's just me personally. So we talked about the AR, and then the same thing for AP. Again, make sure that AP ledger is based upon that. A question that we always get asked is that, let's say the subledger is right, how do I fix the general ledger? And that is something usually you want to talk to your accountants about. But usually, in all essence, if you're going to fix the AR balance, usually you're offsetting a sales account. And if you're fixing your accounts payable GL balance, usually a lot of times you're fixing you're offsetting to a cost of goods account. The one thing I always tell people is that if it goes off, please watch that. And usually what I tell people to do is that for a week, at the end of every day, make sure that they reconcile. Sometimes things are getting posted by mistake, and we're going to talk about that momentarily. But sometimes things are getting posted by mistake. So, I always, if it's off, I fix it, and then I will have them once a day verify that those two are accurate. And then if it's good after a week, then maybe do it once a week, and then again do it once a month. Sometimes if you inherited someone's Sage Intacct system, they might not have been doing this, and so that it's very hard going back in history regarding that. So the modules that require closing are the following: time and expense, cash management, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and general ledger. Now, a couple things here. These can be done at the entity level or the top level, and we'll go over that in a second. And then the other thing that's really important is that you don't need to close the general ledger. So to me, at the end of the month, like on the 10th of the month or whatever day it is, I will close out my time and expense, my cash management, my ARAP. And what you're just doing is that you are preventing people from posting by mistake to those modules. That's all you're doing. It's really not doing much more than that. The nice thing is that if you do need to reopen it, you can reopen it. So don't stress that if you close it, you cannot reopen it. You can do that. But in all essence, you're preventing people from putting things into the wrong period. And that's really important. The general ledger one is one that a lot of times people don't close until 6 months after the year. For example, you might be making adjusting journal entries for a while. What I always like to do is at the end of the year, I always try to close up to December if possible. And then once I get my December final numbers, then I'll close December when that's done. And again, all you're doing is preventing people from posting into the general ledger period, because you can open it up if needed at that point. Now, when you do the closing, I'm going to jump back into the Sage Intacct here. When we go into closing, for example, what you'll see is that under these modules, you'll have a subledger, and you'll see close and open and close. Now, I'm at the top level here. So if I do, sorry, I did the wrong one there. If I do close, it will ask you which entity do you want to do. You can do these at the sub-entity level directly, and it will automatically fill that in. Or if you leave it blank, it's going to do all your entities at one time. So for those who have a lot of entities or things like that, you might not want to do that. But if I do, okay, great, we're going to leave it. I'm not going to actually do it. But if I say I want this entity, and then it's going to ask me, look at what I haven't closed out, and it's going to allow me to say I can to the ending period. Now, if I said August, it will actually go all the periods between those periods. So if you skipped a bunch of months or have not done it, don't fret. You can actually say, hey, I want to close all of 2020, and you just scroll down, and now that will close at that point. Now, again, I'm not going to do this in my environment because otherwise I might have problems later when I do a demo, but just wanted to show you that aspect there. And the entity is not required here. Last couple of things, and then I'm going to make sure that no one has any questions along the way. So first of all, as we talked about, closing the books prevents users from posting transactions to the wrong periods. We talked about that. Books can be reopened. Don't worry about that. You can close one entity or all entities at the same time. And I think the two most important aspects on here is that one of the things that we find that gets your subledgers out of balance with your general ledger is that people are posting directly to the account. So we recommend that you click on the box disallow direct postings in accounts receivable for the accounts receivable GL account, the accounts payable, as well as retained earnings and inventory. And I'm going to show you that. So if you go back into Sage Intacct, and I go to the general ledger module, and I go to my general ledger accounts here, but I'm not going to save anything here. And if I find my AP account, or I'm going to just do my AR account right now, this one. Let me just do this one and hit edit at this point here. There's a box here. It says disallow direct posting. Now this was added back in 2019, but some people know about it, some people don't. So we're always going to remind this. So what this box does is that if you have this here, you cannot make a journal entry directly to this account. Now, if you need to fix an account, you can always uncheck that, make your journal entry, and then check that to make sure that people don't make mistakes moving forward. So again, that's something I definitely recommend you do. Especially retained earnings, you should never journal entry to retained earnings. The last thing that we'll say here is that, as I mentioned in my notes, when you have a module like, for example, AP or AR, if you have users that have these on their menu, that means you have not set up your security right. So again, look at, make sure that a day-to-day user does not have the ability to open and close the subledger. I would never give them access to that in our environment. So again, please make sure that, the rights that people have, you might want to make sure they don't have rights to do that. So with that, any questions before I dive into reporting periods? Does not look like we have any so far. And again, always feel free to interrupt. You can always ask a question. We're monitoring that along the way. So one of the next things you have to do is you have to set up your reporting periods. Now, if you've been on Sage Intacct for a while, or maybe just got implemented, you might have only set up 1 or 2 years. You might not have set up 2022, 2023. Now, some people don't set those up in advance because they don't want people posting to them. There are ways of turning that off, putting warnings and errors for posting to future periods, but also another way of preventing it is by not setting up the periods ahead of time. But before you do any 2022 postings, you need to make sure your reporting periods have been set up. So don't wait till the end of the month. Don't wait till January until you get an error in your posting or an error, which again, you'll have to open up another screen, set up your reporting periods. What you basically do is that within here, you can come to your general ledger and you come to your setup and you go to your reporting periods here and you'll see what has been in here. Now, reporting periods, so do two things. One is that, for example, there for the month ends, but then also for reporting itself. So for example, you'll see fourth quarter 2021 here. So I've got it broken out from a reporting aspect. And when you set up these here, this is where you put in the start and ending date. So it's great for when you're trying to create reports. It's going to take those transactions and automatically put that into that grouping for per se. And you'll see how these are set up here. So at this point here, I can click on add and add the 2022s through this way. You can also import them in through the assisted company setup. I'm not a huge fan of that way because it will create 2 years automatically. But again, that's up to you how you want to do that. So again, make sure your 2022s are set up now so that you don't wait till January 1st and someone yells at you that they cannot post at that point. Perfect. So from a year-end process here, the good thing is that you're doing month-end processes every single month. Hopefully you have a checklist of what you're doing. If you ever want us to review your checklist, if there's any questions on your month-end process, please let us know here at ETHOSystems. We're happy to help you out. So with that, we're going to dive into 1099s. Now, some of you are live on the system, some of you are not, just kind of based upon where you're at. But we're going to talk about 1099s. So the first thing that you always need to worry about with 1099s is, are your vendors set up? And there's 4 main fields that you really need to make sure are set up. The first one is your tax ID. The second one is and this one's optional, is the 1099 name. And the only reason you need that is that if it's different from your print as name for the vendor. So if you have a vendor called ETHOSystems, but you want to put their 1099 as ETHOSystems of Arizona, for example, you could do that. That's probably one of the not overly utilized fields. You have to choose the right 1099 form, and we're going to talk about those wonderful forms in a moment. And then as well as the 1099 contact. Again, and that's the address that it's going to be using at that point. So there's 4 fields there that you set up. When you'll see here, you'll see this little form 1099. It's like a hyperlink. It's that blue hyperlink. And we're going to show that in real life in a moment. But when you click on that, it's going to bring you into an area here. Now, keep in mind that last year, I think it was last year, yes, the IRS decided to make a bunch of changes and they got rid of the 1099 miscellaneous box 7. What did that mean? Well, they moved it to a 1099 NEC, which is a non-employee compensation 1099. And if you actually read the history on there, that actually was a 1099 for a long time. They consolidated it into the miscellaneous, and then last year they have broken it back out to 1099 NEC to box 1. At the current time, box 7 is not being used for your 1099s. Now, when you're in this screen here, and I'm going to go into it momentarily, this allows you to enter your beginning balances. So if you did a mid-year conversion or the amounts are wrong in there, you can actually change that amount so that your amounts are correct. So again, for mid-year conversions, we usually just have we'll bring that information in from before you converted. Now, one of the new features they've added in here is that if you did update a vendor, let's say that in November, or let's say at the end of this class, you go in and you go, oh my gosh, I need to check all my vendors at this point here. Well, if you go in there and change it at this point to a 1099 vendor, you'll get this magical box that says confirm 1099 updates. How do you want to apply the updates? And what it will do is that by default, it'll say don't update previous transactions, but it will update all previous transactions for this vendor based upon the modified 1099 updates, all transactions for this vendor for the current year and period, for the current and prior year, I mean. So again, a lot of times people just check one of these two if they want to make sure that all the bills they've entered in are correct. So again, really important that if you do it, if you set up a vendor wrong, there is a fail-safe method now within Sage Intacct to fix that. So going into my vendors here, if I go to my accounts payable and into vendors, and I'm going to pick on A1 electric at this point here, I'm going to click on the good old edit button. And by the way, there is a new message up here about 1099. So it's already up here. So if you want to read their guide as well, order tax forms, which we'll talk about momentarily, we'll get to that. But if I go to my A1 electric at this point here, again, go to my additional information. This is where I put their taxpayer ID number. I can put their name. I click on the form at this point here, and you'll see by default it's blank. And now I can say, okay, what is this? Is it a 1099 div, interest, miscellaneous, not for non-employee compensation? And then I can say non-employee compensation. And if I did that one there, that's where I would find my famous old box 7 for miscellaneous there for the year. And then again, I have the ability to update the information down here. I can put my beginning balances in here, or if I just simply say save, I probably do not have any entries for the current year. That's why it didn't ask me that, but it would prompt me for that information to change any of my existing records at that point here. Perfect. Oh, I did it the wrong spot. Apologize. So once I saved the vendor, now it asks me, do I wish? So I'm going to say, sure, I'm going to change this for all records, and I'm purposely going to do that. So now it updated my database. Apologies, I got ahead of myself there. So Sage will produce 4 things for you for 1099s. It will produce your 1096 form, which is the header of what you're submitting. It will do your 1099 form itself, print those out. It expects that you have pre-printed 1099 form. So it's not going to print out the 1099. So please do not wait until January to order your tax forms. In this year, we've heard every possible issue of delays known to person at this point here. So please do not wait to order your 1099 forms. And again, the ones that come from Sage Intacct are the ones that are guaranteed to line up out of the box. So those are the best ones to really use. And you buy them directly, not through us. You can run the 1099 report. I highly recommend running that first every single time. So that gives me, and I'm going to show you that in a second, that gives me a good report of what's going to be on my 1099 and my 1096. And then last but not least, we have our 1099 file export. Now, create file. I want to make sure that we specify this here. This creates an export file, not for the IRS, but for some of the services on the Intacct market space that will read that information and then file on your behalf. So this does not create a file that is IRS compliant. This will create a text file, a CSV file export that most of the 1099 companies out there will import in and be able to electronically file your 1099s for you. The electronic file is required for if you have over 250 1099s that you are filing. So please keep that in mind. Before we go through the process, just a couple of quick tips here. First of all, run the 1099 report first. As I mentioned, you can order the forms from these websites here. This is the one from Intacct Direct, and I'll show you this real quick. If you go to order tax forms here, and it will bring you to here, and then you click on this link here. And I noticed that I don't know if there was an Amazon issue, but it takes a couple refreshes. I do not know why. I just noticed that. And it has started happening yesterday. So you can order from here or the other website that forms for Intacct. I have seen that one be a little bit faster, to be honest. Sage Intacct will create the file for you, but it will not create the one that gets imported directly to the IRS. That website for everyone is that if you go to marketplace.intacct.com, and you just simply type in 1099 up here. You'll see that there are a couple ones out there that will file for you, like tax1099.com. So again, don't wait till the last minute to contact them. But this is one that will automatically, or they will send your 1099s electronically for you based upon that export. The last two things, this one is the most important. Please don't call us January 31st at 5 o'clock saying, I am trying to get these printed out. These are supposed to be postmarked by the end of the month, and they're supposed to be sent to the IRS by the end of the month. They've moved those up to only 30 days. We always tell our clients, shoot to have them done by mid-January. Again, it's based upon, 1099s are based upon the date you cut the check, not the date that nothing else. So it's based upon the cash aspect. So if you cut your checks on December 31st, theoretically, you can actually start doing your 1099s at that point because you've done your last check run. So it's really based upon your last check run of 2021. But please don't wait till the last minute. We get really swamped during this time, and we want to make sure that we help you out. And then if you do make any mistakes, one of the neat things you can do when you're doing the 1099s is there is a corrected box. So if you do submit them, and then in January or February you find out they were wrong for some reason, there is a corrected feature within the form that lets you indicate that they've been corrected at that point. Now, just to kind of take you through the process within the software itself here, I'm going to come to here, and under my 1099, I'm going to first go run that report. And the reason I ran that report, for example, and I always would run this for the entire current year. So, or I would do maybe specify the year at that point, because obviously if you're running this in 2022, you don't want it, it's going to be for actually your prior year. So just be careful about that little, that setting there. You can say select which vendors and employees at that point here. You can also click on which forms are you going to run this for. Again, if you're doing dividends or interest, you might have that. Miscellaneous, again, most people do not have that anymore. And then Sage Intacct does do a lot of these other ones as well. I'm just got it for NEC today purposes. I want this in detail. And if I hit the view button right now, you'll see that the first one that comes up, the other one might not have anything in there. But again, if I have this one here, you'll notice that the reason I say run this report is make sure if you're missing a taxpayer ID number, it will show you that there. So again, it's perfect from that. It makes it a lot easier from that aspect. The next thing with that looks good, I would run my 1099 forms. So again, which year are you running this for here? You can select your vendors at that point. Which format are they doing? The NECs, for example, at that point there. And one thing that we highly recommend is excluding credit card payments, because that's different. That will make sure that you're in balance. A lot of people, that's why they've added that feature. So again, this is where you can kind of get your offset, so that if it's a little bit off, you can adjust the vertical and the horizontal alignment at that point. And then I could print these out at that point. When those look good, I could do my 1096s. And then last but not least, if I wanted to create the file, you can come here, do that, and then you simply there's no print feature, you just export it out to a format that, again, another provider will have. I'm going to check for questions regarding this process. Everyone's gotten a lot of, I either went through it thoroughly, or everyone's needs a little bit of caffeine to them. So the last but not least, the last thing to go over today, what we want to, we try to do these monthly. So far we've done one on financials, we've done one on dashboards and list views, we've done 1099s. The next one that we're going to be doing is on our collaborate feature. This is a great feature within Sage Intacct for communication. What we'll be talking about is how to set up collaborate, how to use it, but most importantly, give you real life examples on how other companies are using it for collections and note taking and stuff like that. And instead of using email. It allows you to really document the transaction at the transaction level. So anyway, that one's going to be for January 13th. Try to do that after period end for most people. And then we will please register just like you've done today. We use the GoToWebinar feature for all that. And with that, I'm going to ask any last questions. Otherwise, I kept a promise, which we wanted to keep this between 30 and 45 minutes, or 30 to 40 minutes. And I'm going to make sure that no one has any questions here. The question is that if you went live with Sage Intacct this year, yes, part of our implementation is that we will help you bring over the 1099 beginning balances. So there is, please work with whoever your consultant was at the time of the implementation, and they'll be happy to help you throughout, get the beginning balances in there. Again, schedule that early on, really after your last check run. That way you can make sure that all the balances are correct in the system. And again, remember, it's based upon what you paid. So if you brought over, it's not based upon the invoices themselves. It's based upon the check runs that were done in your prior system. So just keep that in mind. It's based upon that. Does not seem like we have any other last questions for today. So I want to appreciate everyone joining today. If there's any other trainings that you want here at ETHOSystems, please let me know. Definitely glad that everyone joined, and thank you. And if we don't talk to you, have a wonderful holiday season, safe New Year's, and look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.